Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's a beautiful day to be in the house of Grace United Methodist once again. As the song says, I'm so glad to be in service one more time. Grace United Methodist Church, Pastor, you know, is one of the nicer churches in the district. It's one of the more welcoming churches in the district, and I have proof of that. Because like the introduction said, I've been here almost a half dozen times between, because I came when I was running too. Because I needed y'all to pray over me when I was running. So between running and being in office, I've been here almost a half dozen times. And almost every time I've had the pleasure of being joined by my amazing wife, Mrs. Marquees Harris-Dawson, who I'll ask to stand up right now. This is the person that makes it possible for me to do this work. And I'll just share, I'll say you guys have to keep this inside the house. She doesn't go to everybody's service. Some services she goes to once, and I say, I'm going to visit this other church again. She said, okay, you have a wonderful time. Service, we'll see you when you get back. But the churches where the love of Christ pours out, and you feel welcome and you feel engaged, she's always happy to join me at. And so I thank you for joining me again this morning, and I thank you, Grace United Methodist, for being a place that she wants to come. I'm also excited to be joined today by my mother, Cheryl Dawson. Please stand up. Mom, stand up. We'll get to this later in the speech, but you're always working on your communication. Somewhere in the middle of the afternoon yesterday, I said, I should probably tell my mom that I'm speaking at the service, because it'll come out on the internet, and then I'll get a call about not being warm. So we let her know, and I'm very happy that she's with me today. Did an incredible job in these very streets. Grew up in these very streets and helped raise me and bring me to the place that I am and continues to be one of the most important assets that we have going forward. Also happy to be joined by your pastor, or to join your pastor, Rev. Dr. Bridgeforth, who is a mighty and prolific man of the cloth. Joins the ranks of the great South Los Angeles preachers over the years, as an author and a scholar and a leader, and is on the front lines on the tough struggles of today. You could get some of our preachers that get in these congregations, and they get there and they get comfortable, and just even across the street, they have no idea what's happening. And your pastor is out there. We run into him, we see him often, and we appreciate your ministry to not just Grace United Methodist, but to the entire Southern California area. So thank you. A big round of applause. For this wonderful congregation. Slauson is one of those streets that if you live in South LA, you go up and down Slauson. And all your life you see Grace United Methodist Church. The lawn is always cut. The front is always clean. On Sunday you see people looking good, going to service. It is a testimony to the best of who we can be. And so I appreciate Grace United Methodist Church. And I'm going to ask for one more round of applause for this beautiful congregation and what you've meant to this community. Come on, give it up for Grace United Methodist. All the trustees and the teachers and the nurses and the tambourine players. These are the kinds of organizations that hold up the community and hold up the world that we live in. We thank you for inviting us to speak. I will start off, Commissioner Woods Gray, I will start off by making an attempt to lower expectations. So my dad is a preacher. So I grew up in the black church. I've been a student of black preaching. I went to Morehouse College, a school for preachers. So I know how preaching is supposed to go. And I know what I'm about to do. And that is not preaching. I'm going to give a talk and share some ideas and theories that we have. Some theories of the case based on the text that that you all gave me. Somebody saw my name on the marquee this week, that's just wonderful, by the way, that you all did that. They saw my name on the marquee and they said, Councilman, are you going to hoop on Sunday? And I said, well, I don't think I'm going to have a chance to practice with the organist, so there won't be any hooping today. But we thank you for allowing us to speak. We know that a lot of preachers can become politicians, but the skills are not necessarily transferable in the opposite direction. So we want to be super clear about that and do the best we can. And if you all will help me, I grew up in the church, so you just say amen a little bit louder than you might feel like it, and you wave your hands once or twice. If we say something you agree with, we'll get through this talk. In all seriousness, I am very grateful and very blessed, and believe it is one of those blessings that we're standing in this pulpit this morning on Men's Day to celebrate men. Just yesterday, within the last 24 hours, folks may or may not know, yesterday was National Remembrance Day for victims of homicide. So we marched through South LA, we marched down Vermont, and we ended up at a park and met face to face, Sister Mosley, with families who lost people in this year. And so the story is all too familiar almost every time. There's really two stories that happen. Occasionally there's a slight change, but mostly the story is a black male who's somewhere between the ages of 15 and 40, usually 15 and 30, gets killed with a gun by another black man somewhere between the ages of 15 and 30. And if that's not the story is a Latino man who gets killed by another Latino man between the ages of 15 and 30. And so from one end of the district, from clear down to Imperial, all the way up to Adams, we met with family after family, and just being face to face with that grief all morning long yesterday. It is a true blessing and a joy to be in the room with people like the Brothers from God's Property, from the scholarship recipients, the cordsmen, and to see some of our people doing well, and to see some of our people surviving, and to see some of our men who've escaped what I believe is the worst disease of men in the world. Whether it's one-on-one homicides or whether it's mass killing, violence is virtually a male-only disease. Black male life expectancy in LA County is 56 years. Most of that gap is what we do to each other. Men also visit violence on women. Don't get me wrong about that. But I mean, the purveyance of violence and the execution of violence is almost exclusively men. And so to be here to speak to men and to see men that are doing well is a particular blessing to me and does my spirit well. And so again, thank you one more time to the Grace United Methodist family for having us. So, amen. Pastor, they gave us a text from the book of Titus from the writer Paul. And Paul is a writer in the Bible that is, how shall I say it, not without controversy. Especially for an elected official in the city of Los Angeles. All right? So I'll ask you all to pray with me on the topic, a few good men. A few good men. So we have a hard time with this text. When you're in the law, one of the things that's important is context. So, when you're a politician, you know how when you're looking at television or YouTube, they'll take a snippet out of what someone says, and they'll put it on, and they'll let that represent their point of view, right? So when I look at this passage, Titus 2:6-8, that says, these nice things about what men should do, I said, well, let me read the whole thing. Let me see what's actually being said here. And that's when it starts to get a little troubling, Pastor. Because if you go up a couple verses ahead of that, and you go to the chapter before that, you see some things about women that don't mesh with my reality.
All right.
Is what I'll say.
All right.
And you see some things, even in the passage about men, that even Paul himself doesn't live up to. Because basically the text, I'll just put it in the common parlance, or how we would say on the street. Basically what the text is, tell the young men to act right. Don't talk too loud, don't get out of order, pull your pants up, comb your hair, don't come in here with these dreadlocks. That's basically what this text says. Except that Paul didn't do any of that. Paul was quite rebellious and quite rambunctious and quite the troublemaker, and the troublemaker on purpose. Also our history, right? When you look at our history or you look at biblical history, in either case, God calls on people to be troublemakers and to be disorderly, right? So, whether it's Paul himself or Jesus Christ during Holy Week, goes into the center of business and starts turning over tables. Disorderly. And here we have Paul saying, tell everybody to be orderly. Tell everybody to behave themselves. Right? And so it's troubling for us. In our own history, in our own political history, right? If it were not for people being disorderly, most of us wouldn't be living in the neighborhoods that we live in, driving the streets we drive, or working the jobs that we work, right? It was a good Christian woman, Rosa Parks, who didn't follow orders. By the way, if you read further in this chapter, it says if somebody in authority gives you an order, you should follow the order and not talk back. That's in the Bible. Right here after it's passage that we have. Yeah, it's there. It's there. I went and read different versions, and in every version it's pretty much the same thing. Harriet Tubman said, no, we're not doing this. We're getting out. 19 years old, a young woman gets a rifle and a Bible and says, we're leaving. We're out. Disorderly. And so whether it's Malcolm X or even Barack Obama, the paragon of order, I can tell you because I'm in politics, the way politics work, and you know this, Commissioner, the way politics work, you're supposed to wait your turn, right? So when she's trying to get behind somebody. See, you're supposed to wait your turn, right? When you've done the work and you've come up the ranks, then you get to run for something like president or governor. And Barack Obama said, no, we're not going to go along with the order. I'm going to be disorderly. I'm doing it now. And I don't care how young I am. I don't care how inexperienced I am. I'm going to put myself before the people, and we're going to have a vote. Disorderly. So disorder is very, very important to us. And so you see this text, and you feel like it's in disagreement. The other thing is this issue of gender, which I can't speak on this without dealing with directly. So this is one of the many passages that male chauvinists, especially Christian ones, use to justify their chauvinism, right? You've all heard it. You've all been in the church at the time. And some of the most harsh ones say, well, Paul says that the woman should not speak, and that the man is the head of the household, and that the woman has to follow the man. It's all there, right? I'm not making this up. You can read it later, right? That doctrine and that way of thinking permeates almost every form of life that we have today. So whether it's in business, where less than 15% of Fortune 500 companies are led by women, even though we know in every society, women are some of the best leaders of organizations that there are. They lead the most important organization in human organization, the family. Almost every family, no matter what people say, families are led by, just ask a real estate agent who's in charge of the family. They'll tell you. When the big decisions get made, in families, 80% of income, the spending in 80% of the income of families is decided by women. So that means, again, in families, the important asset, money, the decisions about money are made by women. I can see some of my brothers going, yeah, that's definitely the case. But in the United States and around the world, women don't we don't pick women when it comes to leading our business organizations. Black women. This is such a burden on our community, an incredible burden on our community. If there's one thing you could do to improve the conditions in communities in South LA, you can end this. Black women make 63 cents on the dollar for the same job that a white man makes a dollar. If you even that out, it would almost entirely close what's called the wealth gap between black people and everybody else. If you just even out what women make with white men, what black women make with white men. And so we do this. But a lot of times the Christian church can't say anything about it, right? Because the Christian church does the same thing. The Christian church is busy arguing over who can be a preacher. Who can be a bishop? Who can be in leadership? And, you know, in some of our more regressive settings, it's about what you can wear in church and what you can't. We try to police women's clothing, right? There was a church I went to, and we came in. This is one, I shouldn't do this because it's going to embarrass her, but this is one of the churches we went to. Not here, this would never happen in Grace United Methodist. In fact, let's just say it wasn't in LA, so I don't get in any trouble. Somewhere else. And they came in, and the people gave my wife a towel to put over her legs. Like her legs are going to do something to the people in the church. Right? This is what we do. And again, it is what it is, right? This kind of thing is justified, right? So she's held responsible for how somebody else is going to respond to her legs. Right? And so she has to do something about it. It's not on the person to do something about it, right? It's not on the man to say, it's not on us to say, you can't act like that under any circumstances, right? It's on her to say, don't do that because he might act out, right? That type of thinking and that type of backwards approach is justified because people take Paul and they read these passages and they do so in a way that I think distorts it. Even in culture, as liberal and progressive as Hollywood is supposed to be, you know, they hold themselves up as, and we appreciate them for it. Whenever there's a civil rights fight, they're right there to fight it. Whenever there's a fight around gender equality, Hollywood actors and studios stand up. Anything on the environment, the right to love who you want to love as an adult, Hollywood is right there. But then you look at what Hollywood actually does. Interesting stat. 69% of the talking in all Hollywood movie releases, the big studio releases, is done by men. Now you want to talk about something that does not match up to real life, right? That is not reality television, right? And oftentimes, when women are speaking in movies, they're talking about men, right? But what happens in everyday life when people have conversations and they go about their business, Hollywood doesn't show that. So even Hollywood is infected by this idea of male chauvinism that we believe, or I would put forward, that the many of the interpreters of Paul are infected by as well. And perhaps even the people that translated the Bible. Because remember, the people that, by the time the Bible is translated into the language that we read, sexism and patriarchy has already taken hold, and people are already subject to that. There are records of again, in Pauline's writings, where the names of women apostles were changed and masculinized so that it would appear that they were men. But when you actually read the history and go back in the history, you'll find out that they were in fact women. And in our own culture, right in our own backyard, and you boys you young men who are going to college, I've been your age, which is why I can call you a boy, because it's going to take a minute. It's going to be a minute. If you just hold on, get your education, go forward, but it'll come to you. So I might refer to you a boy. No, I don't mean any disrespect by it. But our music, what we put forward, talks about women in the most hateful and degrading and encourages abuse, celebrates abuse, celebrates exploitation. I won't embarrass anybody by saying some of the lyrics, but we all know what it is, right? You weren't born thinking that. It got taught to you. It got taught to you because we live in a context where chauvinism is the rule, and going against it is the exception. Being disorderly against chauvinism is the exception. This is done because of Paul, and so, Pastor, again, I have him sitting in front of this text by Paul, saying, I got to go talk about this at Grace United Methodist Church. One of the things that we had to do before I got off of that is really try to make sense of Paul as a whole. And so there's a good book that I recommend to everybody. It says What Paul Really Said About Women by Paul Temple Bristow. I've read major sections of it. Again, What Paul Really Said About Women, Paul Temple Bristow. One of the things that we learned, and Jeremiah Wright, Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright is well known for his sermon, God is on a Manhunt, for pointing this out. When Paul uses the term, the man is the head of the family, people interpret that as head meaning in charge, the CEO, the boss, the leader, the captain, the major, the whatever. But in fact, Greek and a bunch of other languages, especially languages that were pioneered by people of color, Greek has a bunch of words that we in English have one word for. So love is the famous one, right? So we have one word, love, and it means a whole bunch of stuff. It'd say, I love my wife and I love the Lakers, right? Those are very different things, right? And I love macaroni and cheese, right? Right? And I love when people are on time, right? And I love people who give short speeches, right? All those things, we use the same word, but we mean different things. And so Greek, and again, I point out not just Greek, but almost every other language, especially African languages, especially indigenous languages, have a bunch of words for what we call love. And so Greek has at least 3 words for love. They have phileo, which means brotherly love. Like I love my community, and I love the Lakers, and I love flying a kite, right? And then they have agape, which is spiritual love, which is the love that God has for the world, and what God has for individuals, and sort of familial love that is planted in our hearts. And then we have eros. Eros is love that takes place in a romantic context, right? Where there's probably sex involved and other things, and flowers and music and the rest, right? So those 3 words, so when you read the Bible and it says, for God so loved the world, and in another place it might say Samson loved Delilah, those are different things, right? If you actually go back to the Greek, what you'll find is that the Greek actually uses different words. The same is true for this concept of head, right? So head, there's arch, like the archangel. So that means that's what we think of when we think of a head. That means the person in charge, the person responsible, the CEO, whatever. There's another word, and I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly, and you rescue me if I'm wrong, Pastor, but kephal, which is another word for head, a Greek word for head. What that means is the person on the front line. That means the vanguard. That means, you know when you watch a cop show and they're about to raid a house and there's the person that goes in first? That's what this is. So when Paul says the man ought to be the head of the family, what Paul's saying is the man ought to be the first one to take on the risk. If there's danger, he ought to face it first. If there's something to be sacrificed, he ought to sacrifice it first. And that's how he shows leadership of his family. So as I dug a little deeper, I got a little bit more comfortable with speaking about this text. And so I'll close now with what I think we can do with this passage and how I think it's useful to us today and how I think Paul is useful to us. Because after all, we reject chauvinism, right? And we know that sometimes, a lot of times, especially our folks, we need to be disorderly, right? We need to do the opposite of what this text says, or else we won't get anywhere. So how do I figure out, and how do we make this useful today? The way we do that is when we look at context. So we look at there's this passage in front of us, but how does this passage arrive to us? How was it created? What was the motivation behind it? And when you study the history of this passage, what you find is Paul was writing letters to folks who were in the movement, in the very, very new Christian movement with him. And they were trying to build organizations. They were trying to build churches. So you'll see at the beginning of it, they'll say, this is a letter to the church of Galatians, or this is a letter to the church of Titus. And so what Paul is saying, This is how you need to behave when you're trying to build an organization. You still with me? Yeah. All right? Because Paul understood, and I think God wanted to deliver us in this time period to say, there are some things you can do on your own, but there are a lot of things you can only do through an organization. Right? You can go to college on your own, but you're going to need an organization to help get you through. Right? There are a lot of things that we can accomplish as individuals, but there are many things that we can only accomplish as an organization. And in order to have an organization, there are certain things that we have to do. The main thing we have to do is leave the ego and the individual at the door. Right? You got that? You got to leave the ego and the individual at the door. If you want to have an organization, if you come in an organization and everybody's doing their own thing, right, and everybody's deciding to have a sit-in or a strike when you're trying to have an organization, what's going to happen to your organization? There won't be very much of an organization, right? We can, and you've seen all of this happen, we can all individually put on hoodies, right, after Trayvon Martin's shooting. We can all put on hoodies and we can go on Instagram and we can do that as individuals. But it takes an organization like Black Lives Matter to actually challenge and help pull back on the Stand Your Ground law, so that the law that allowed Trayvon Martin's shooter to go free isn't there anymore. Only an organization can do that. And so that's all right. So in order to have an organization, you need at least a few good men. I don't think there's very many organizations that don't have at least a few good men. It's why the Marines have as a logo or a slogan, we're looking for a few good men. Because that's the only way you can actually build an organization. The first and most important reason why you need a few good men, and you've got to have the comportment that's laid out in Titus, is when other people come in the organization, they're going to look at the people in the organization to figure out how to act. Right? So when young men see these men, that's how they're learning how to act, right? If you're on your phone, right, and you're in and out all day, and you two are talking to each other, that's what they're going to do, because they're going to follow the people that are in the organization. So the call is, when you're trying to build an organization, and in an organization, you've got to behave in a certain way. And so, based on that, and based on what Paul said, I would put forward these 7 things that I think everybody in an organization, but especially men, need to pay attention to. 1, be consistent, right? There's no better form of orderliness than being consistent. That means being in place when you say you're going to be in place, delivering on the things that you said you're going to do, and do it every day. Do it when it's raining, do it when it's snowing, doing it when it's hot, doing it when there's a basketball game on that's really important and you really want to see. Be consistent. The second one, be of good comportment. Don't come into the place with an attitude, right? Everybody knows that's trying to run a meeting or trying to run an organization or choir rehearsal or anybody else. If somebody comes in, or even go to work, if somebody comes in and has got an attitude, what does it do? It affects the whole group, right? And the whole organization can't function because whatever on your mind, however bad it might be, you brought it to the group, and now the entire group has to deal with that instead of deal with what the group is going to do. So be of good comportment. Try to get yourself together before you come to the meeting. And if you can't get yourself together, call and say, hey, I can't get it together today. I'm going to catch you at the next meeting, right? So be consistent, be of good comportment. Third one, very, very simple, especially to the young people, be on time. Right? Be on time. When you're late, you're telling everybody else whatever I was doing was more important than the group, right? And as long as the individual is more important than the group, you can't build the organization. So be on time. So be consistent, be of good comportment, be on time. Have strong follow-through. Strong follow-through is one of the most underrated assets of individuals in the world today. The what you will give and what any employer will give for someone who does what they say they're going to do, shows up where they're supposed to show up, follows the directions to a T, and reports back, is golden. Also essential for any organization. We have an organization, we make a division of labor, we leave that table, we come back, and your piece isn't done, the whole organization fails, right? And so we put forward the idea of having strong follow-through. So be consistent, be of good comportment, be on time, have strong follow-through. Next one, we still struggle with this one. Be a good communicator. Take responsibility for communication. Nothing will undermine a group quicker than what goes unsaid. And my wife is doubled over in laughter at this moment. Take responsibility for communication. Don't wait, because here's the way it goes. So, and I'm a politician, so this happens to me all the time. And you all know this, right? So something can happen in the neighborhood, and I don't say anything about it, right? Because a lot of times I don't say anything about it because I didn't have anything to do with it. This person's house, that's their property, their business, they did what they wanted to do. And you let a week pass, and people have made up about 8 different opinions on what I'm doing. Oh yeah, well the council, the people, you look up in the internet, because internet now is not just speculation in the hallway. The hallway meeting makes it where you can see it and hear it, because it's on people put the hallway meetings on the internet. So the councilman is doing this because he wants more white people to move in. He doesn't like the high crime numbers, so if more white people come, he'll have less crime, right? I mean, out of whole cloth, people make up things, and I get really, really angry. But then I remember that as the leader, the responsibility for communication is on me. So I have to tell them what's happening. I have to tell them I have nothing to do with that man who sold his house to that person that you don't like. And I did not ask all these people that walk their dogs to come and move where you live. I did not do that. I have to take responsibility for communication in any organization, because when something is left unsaid or uncommunicated, human beings 100% of the time will make something up. And what they make up is unlikely to be good. So, again, be consistent, be a good comportment, be on time, have strong follow-through, be a good communicator. Always be a learner. Anybody who comes to the table who believes they have nothing to learn but they only have to teach is a person that will alienate a group in a very, very quick way. A very, very quick way. And so we say, sometimes when you think you know, maybe be quiet and let somebody else who knows say. Right? And you'll be surprised. A lot of times you learn something. Right? You learn that what you thought you knew, you didn't actually know. There are so many unknown unknowns. And so we say always be a learner. And then lastly, we say be mission driven. Be mission driven. So be about what the organization is about. And when you know in your heart you're not about what the organization is about, get out. They say lead, follow, or get out of the way. The people who are not leading or following, they're not on mission. They're doing their own thing. They're getting something personally from the organization, right? That is meaningful to them or that's helpful to them, but they're not contributing to the progress of the organization. And so we say be mission driven. So those things are: be consistent, be a good comportment, be on time, have strong follow through, be a good communicator, be a learner, and be mission driven. And so this is our theory, Grace United Methodist. This is our theory of the case of Brother Paul and his sometimes tough words about how we should interact and how we should behave and how we should be in the world. When we're building organizations, and there is no more important organization than the Black Church. Amen. One more time, there is no more important organization than the Black Church. This country only survives because of the Black Church. We've got a problem in Washington right now. Let me just tell you, all the pundits talk around it, and they say, well, urban, and they have all these euphemisms. The Black Church is going to solve that problem next November for the United States of America. The Black Church is what built our schools. The Black Church is what gave us any standing that we have and any ability to enjoy the quality of life that we do. All organizations, and especially our churches, need a few good men. Thank you all so much for sharing with me.